I've gotta tell you. So I think you know, but I used to be in the fire department, and so if you're stuck with a bunch of guys for 24 hours a day, like practical jokes become a way of life. So this one time, so you know how if you have a toilet seat and it folds down, and you let the seat down, and underneath the seat there are these two like stoppers that like hold up the seat and give you that much space into between the bowl and the seat.
Yeah.
So I took, and I was crying laughing over this because just the thought of it made me laugh, and it was more real than anything to me. But I took little ketchup packets and I put a split in the ends of them, and I had them facing the front of the seat, and I put them underneath those two stoppers. So, but I did it gently enough where the weight of the seat did not compress. Now, this had to go, there was a lot of thought that went into this. So I had to push all the ketchup to the front of the pack so that it would squirt at one, and I had to angle them so that they would squirt and converge together. And in my head, all I could imagine was my captain sitting down on the seat and the ketchup packets being compressed and squirting to his scrotum, and him feeling some weird sensation and grabbing and looking and seeing red all over his hand and like just screaming, thinking that his scrotum was like just bloody or red.
Oh man.
But I spent days working on this joke. And it's probably the greatest practical joke I ever played at the fire department. But just the imagination of it just made me just cry laughing.
Yeah.
It backfired, of course, because instead of my captain going into there, the very stoic chief went into the restroom.
Oh.
Yeah. And fortunately, he didn't have to sit down, so he lifted up the lid, and he found it. So
what's going on here?
Exactly. Yeah. But he stopped it. He put an end to it. But it was funny to me.
Exactly. You got all the joy from it, just imagining it.
Yes. And still knowing all the effort I put to it just still makes me happy because it was the perfect plan. It was perfect.
Oh, yeah.
So I got a question for you. You mentioned in your letter about the big toe and lower leg dysfunction.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that about?
Oh, see, now we're going on to real basic. I call it basic stuff. That's terrible of me, isn't it?
No, it's good. I want to know. I'm learning.
Well, big toe alignment is obviously very important to our foundations. This is not going to come as a surprise to anyone, but if you think of the foot as a triangle with the heel there, the ball of the well, kind of like a triangle. You've got the ball of the little toe, ball of the big toe, and if we're walking, we land on a heel and we do what's called supination, then we go to pronation, and then the big toe locks in, if you like. Can't remember the name of the tendon. One of the tendons curls the toes, and one of the tendons causes that motion, helps it to lock out in that position. Anyway, I've forgotten the names. It was a long time ago when I studied this. So it hits that position, it locks in, and it takes us back into what we call supination, so a proper gait cycle. So obviously with most modern shoes, and you will know this being a zero shoes wearer, the big toe is pushed in. So the moment you push the big toe in, you create instability. So effectively you cause what we call overpronation, because we no longer have this corner of the triangle here that's going to stop us from continuing to roll in. So the big toe, the alignment of the big toe, simple as that. I mean, it's instrumental in promoting an arch, but more than anything, quite simply, just in promoting a stable foot. And if you don't have a stable foot, then everything further up the chain, we've talked about stability before, I think, when you talk about the pelvic floor, as we'll call it, particularly the gracilis muscle for a lot of people, lack of stability there creates a lack of stability in the energy systems and the organs above it. It doesn't have that foundational support, and it's the same with the feet, obviously. So simply by taking the big toe out of alignment, which we do with, when Kelly mentioned the correct toes, which I used to wear the other day, it just reminded me of going down that rabbit hole some years ago when I used to sell footwear. And it's as simple as that, really. The big toe creates it helps with that foundational stability, which without, again, it goes up the chain, and we can talk about energy, we can talk about blood flow, we can talk about all of those things, but it basically affects the way that we move. as we well know, the way that we move affects our chemistry, our energy, and therefore how we feel and how we perceive the world, who we are, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
If the big toe is not functioning properly, then the body has to compensate in some fashion to keep you walking, going where you want to go. And so then therefore the compensation actually creates more of an energy demand, right? Because it's not as efficient as if everything was moving properly. Is that correct?
No, well, the known pattern that it kind of creates, if you want to call it known, the pattern that's clearly seen is obviously the ankle is a mobile joint. The knee is a more stable joint typically. In terms of, if we're talking planes of motion, the knee is a more stable joint, and then the hip is a more mobile joint. And that's how the body, kind of our joints stack that way, as you well know. So we have really mobile joint, more stable joint, very, very mobile joint, more stable, and it continues through the spine. So if you create a lack of stability in the foot, then to compensate for that lack of stability, the ankle, the next point up from the foot, becomes more stable, in inverted commas. Now, more stability in the ankle means it stiffens up, it tightens to create a more rigid structure there. And then to compensate for that, the knee tries to become more mobile. And we don't want a knee trying to become more mobile, going in every plane of motion in the way that it does. And then we move up to the hip, and the hip becomes more tight, or, so this compensational thing continues all the way up the structure. So from that one small, you could see as a small thing in the foot, you have everything basically going in reverse all the way up the system. So all the joints that are supposed to be mobile and move very freely in all planes of motion don't anymore. And to compensate, the ones that should be more stable become very, very basic kind of way of seeing it. But this is observed in, certain movement modalities. I'm sure you'd be aware of Gray Cook and functional movement screen and stuff like that. And I know you do your own movement screens, and whatever anybody thinks of screenings and however they're done, this pattern is observed. So whether we believe it or not, it is actually seen and it's experienced by people. So it is their truth. It seems to be a truth in terms of how it happens.
So if shoes tend to push the big toe in, so wide box shoes will allow the big toe to be spread out. So
more
that's
so.
Healthier, more so.
Yeah.
What if somebody has spent a lifetime with the narrow shoes and their big toe just now naturally points in?
Well, there's a number of things you can do. One would be to wear something like correct toes, which you're probably aware of, designed by Ray McClanahan, podiatrist. Surgical grade rubber, which you can insert onto the toes, and you can wear it inside your footwear so it doesn't stick out at the edges. It basically slides on, and there's bits between each of the toes, but obviously not on the outside. It's just thin wraparound. So you can wear that, and that will help to encourage the foot to spread, the toes to spread back out. Obviously, if you bear weight on there as well, so standing on one leg, walking in them, anything that encourages the foot to do some work while it's in that position. Particularly if you went on, as you were talking about again the other day, on like a Nervoso insole, or anything that's got that's going to increase sensation in the underside of the foot, because you're sending information then to the foot and it's feeling, should I be here? Because the blueprint for how the body should be is there, whether you want to see it as in the field, the idea of morphic resonance, or whether it, the body itself has some inherent plan of how it should be. So when skipping a little bit here. So even if you were to stand without correct toes on a surface that provided a lot of stimulation for the sole of the foot, the big toe would know that it wasn't where it should be. All the toes would know that they weren't where they should be, because they would be receiving so much feedback. So let's say quite often when the big toe gets pushed in, it rotates slightly as well, like that. Yeah. So now when you put it on a surface that it can feel the sensations, it knows that it's not sat the way it should be sat. So eventually it will start to move out, but that would require a lot of time bearing weight on a surface where you can feel, a lot of sensation, and obviously all kinds of things you can do. Like, if you do rocking, for example, with you, so if you dorsiflex when you're rocking in a rocking position, pushing down on the toes, anything like that encourages the foot to A, have sensations, and B, for the toes to spread, is going to help do that, whether you wear the correct toes or not. A lifetime can be reversed, I believe, from people that have told stories of reversing it with things like correct toes. Obviously, the more out of alignment it is, I'm going to say the longer it's going to take. It doesn't, obviously it depends how much you put into restoring them, as with anything. So yeah, it can certainly be restored, I believe.
So I do think how you just said that's probably the best way. Like, it is going to depend on the person and the severity, but also if they provide the opportunity continually or consistently for the foot to adapt and change.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Information causes adaptation, doesn't it?
Yes. So I'm learning. So I got a question for you, because you said that we're in the new frontier and all rules are out the window, and you felt like stirring the pot a little bit. And you said, I think you said you had some thoughts. You would love to stir the pot on nutrition just for fun. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I didn't have any particular angle in mind, but I just love the field of nutrition as a field for perspectives, very tightly held perspectives. When I'm going to say we know, science has kind of shown, and if you ever tried this experientially, you'll know it too, that how you perceive your food plays a massive role in how that food interacts with your body. So I know that, again, science is not the be all and end all, but experiments have been done multiple occasions to show that how you perceive food massively changes how it interacts with the body, because obviously the environment that it's going into affects how that nutrition interacts with it. So if you perceive something as healthy food, it doesn't matter too much if it's not actually that healthy according to, nutritional guidelines from whoever it may be. I'm not saying for 1 minute that you could eat, well, let's pick something that people consider unhealthy, a McDonald's burger, a double McDonald's cheeseburger.
Supersize me.
Supersize me. I'm not saying that you could necessarily eat that every single day of your life, supersized 2-3 meals a day, however many you want to get into, and remain perfectly healthy. But I also don't believe that that's necessarily the case, that you would become unhealthy. I've seen enough, and from the experiments back it up, from both myself and my brother alone, growing up with the diets we ate and the amount of food we ate and the amount of foods that are supposed to be bad for us that we ate, and yet remained extremely, well, I'm not going to call us extremely good athletes, but we were both very good within our own sporting field, and we were fit, healthy, didn't get sick, all those kind of things. And our diets today would have been considered absolutely appalling. I mean, staggering amounts of chocolate, milk. It wasn't out of the question to sit on a Saturday morning when I finally got a break from the 35 hours of sport a week to lie and watch TV and get through a 7-pack of Kit Kats and a 7-pack of Penguins, 6 packets of crisps, proceed to eat 7 bowls of cereal that day, and so on and so forth. But I'd love to throw the cat among the pigeons in some way when it comes to nutrition, just to get people to open up to the fact that you just don't know. There is no perfect diet. There is no such thing as healthy food. Learning to get in touch with what you need at any given moment, for me, would be the secret. That's not an easy thing to get in touch with, but you say something and I'll try and think of something I can throw in there that's controversial just for the hell of it.
How do you get in touch with what you need?
You stop for a moment. You close your eyes, and this is a practice that develops over time, and you ask, what would I like to eat right now?
Well, that sounds simple.
Yeah, and you'll get a craving soon enough. And then you go and try that, and you try a little bit of it. Okay, was that what I really wanted? And soon you'll get the signals. If you say you get a craving for a pizza, not something I ever crave these days, but if you get a craving for a pizza and you go out and you buy a pizza, you eat that pizza. Might not feel great after. You might feel wonderful. Most people, I'd argue, probably wouldn't feel truly optimal after eating that. Probably. That seems to be what happens a lot of the time. So you now know, next time you get that craving, hold on for a moment. What is it I really need? And obviously there's education in this regarding what nutrient was it that you were looking for within that. Where could you possibly find that somewhere else? But yeah, you can start tuning into that, and bit by bit, the body will guide you as to what you need at any given time, in any given moment, any given season. That's probably a very, very quick, short answer, but it's something that you, by being aware, by being conscious when you eat it, if you sat down to eat a chocolate cake because you were really in the mood for a chocolate cake, there would come a slice at which the body would go, I do not like, before you were full, the body would say, I do not like chocolate cake anymore. Most people couldn't eat more than about 4 or 5 slices of chocolate cake without going, I've had enough. And they wouldn't be stuffed full, because the body is now saying, I don't like the taste of chocolate cake anymore, because it doesn't want whatever was in it that you wanted in the first place. Now, whether that was you like the taste of it because you needed sugar or whatever, because no food is evil. And people say we've been fooled, we've been tricked by our senses. I don't believe that. I believe that if you sit down and you eat that food, very, very quickly the body will go, no, I don't want that anymore, because I've had more than enough of those particular nutrients, or whether it be micro or macro. I don't want that anymore. Okay, you probably wouldn't want to eat a chocolate cake for another week, because the body would not crave something that it's had more than enough of. And this applies to all foods. I think a lot of people, if they ate X amount of meat, a certain type of meat, they wouldn't want that for a while after. And that's because the body's saying, I don't like that at the moment, because I've had enough of it. I've had enough of whatever it was in it, that I'm going to change my taste so that you go and get what I need now. And that might be nothing, which is obviously why we get full.
So basically you're suggesting to invite a mindful conversation with the body, to listen to it and then to try to learn from it, test it out, but to develop it's an invitation, and then develop your senses with it. So like close your eyes, ask the body, or ask yourself what you feel like eating, see what your intuition says, and then test it out. Kinda. Is that it?
Yeah, that would have been a much better way of putting it, rather than me just giving loads of examples.
No, I'm just trying to track with you.
No, absolutely. Again, it's like anything with awareness. If we are aware, it's information. There is information going into the system as you eat that. Everything is information. Whether it's breath, whether it's in water, whatever, and the information's going in that food. And if you listen to that, it'll tell you when.
It's kind of neat, because I may or may not have just written a book about this, but you're saying all this stuff, and I'm like, well, this is cool. It's just kind of like same avenue. So here's a question, because I was thinking about this as you were explaining. Is it possible that people have done this, and say there's a person out there that listened to their body, and their body told them what they needed at this time to feel better, to heal, or whatever it was, and they dialed into it and they grabbed onto it. Say it led them to be a carnivore, like all meat, and they didn't eat anything else, and then they felt fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's what their body needed at that season, at that time.
Absolutely.
But then somehow they told somebody about it, and it became a diet, or because something worked for someone, it becomes now this is the way for everybody, not through their intention, but through how other people interpreted it or grabbed hold of it. Like, is that how diets, do you think that some fads start?
Yeah, I mean, people have done this, I'm sure, since the beginning of time. They've dialed into what they needed at certain times. And you see this, when people go on any diet that restricts a certain type of food, or, they pick a certain type of food and we're going to go with it, like the carnivore diet, for example. I'm sure that it works wonderfully for some people. Generally, you see for a short period of time. The same with most diets, it works for a short period of time, quite often because you're excluding certain things that are creating issues, but, not going to get into that. And it becomes a thing. And this is because we have this thing we call identity that has been created from the moment we were given a name when we were very, very small. And we attach who we are to all these things. And diet is another one of those.
Are you saying diet becomes a part of an identity?
For a lot of people, yeah, absolutely. Well, it does, because you become what you eat to a certain extent. I mean, information goes in. If you were to listen to Sadhguru, for example, and I'm not saying necessarily agree with everything he says, but he will talk about food as information. You become what you eat. Now, it doesn't matter per se what you eat, but you have to bear in mind that, say, for example, plants supposedly integrate more easily with you in terms of levels of consciousness and the amount of information that's in there. That doesn't mean meat is bad. But yeah, it is without a doubt. You see the identity thing.
I think it's the camp of the way. Like I have seen in movement the way to do XYZ. And if you don't do it XYZ way, you're not in our camp. and you're just not at our level. And I've seen the same thing with diet. Like if you don't adopt this way of eating, well, you're wrong and you're misguided, and you obviously don't know anything about nutrition. Like, so I think that's because of the community sense or the sense of belonging. I do think people strive for the way. And once they think they have the way, they draw a line in the sand or put walls up around the way to protect it.
Yeah.
Which is, I get it.
Yes.
But as I mature or get older, I necessarily don't want to be trapped in the way or kicked out of the way. Just like I think there's room for growth and exploration in all of it, but I don't know.
Absolutely. And that's all freedom of movement again. I don't want to waffle on about that too much, but that all comes down to restrictions within the physical body that change the way we're able to interpret information. Whether you want to call that, tension or trauma that's stored within the rear delts or within the psoas or wherever it may be. If we cleanse all of that from the system, then maybe we do just evaporate and, become conscious. Who knows, we're tied together by our karma is one view. But yeah, it's, it's this holding tightly to anything. And that is restricted movement. It's the lack of the ability to be able to see, right, we could go that way or that way. And these are both okay. These could both work at different times.
So I had a friend take me one day. He sat me down for we were having lunch, and he was trying to be gentle with me, but he told me the most amazing thing probably that I needed to hear. I didn't want to hear it at the time, but it has really helped me tremendously because we were talking about God, and he said, and he was a preacher, and he told me, he's like, Tim, you've got to loosely hold on to what you know. He's like, because if you're holding on too much or too tightly to it, you can't be open to receive more. And at the time, like I because if you're holding on to something already, somebody can tell you something and you're like, that's not for me. You're wrong. I'm okay right here. I'm safe with what I got. Yeah. So that was my initial thing, but because it was him and who he was and what he was telling me about something I thought I knew.
Yeah.
And something that I thought he should know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It stayed in my head, and it dug like that weed that digs into the rock and starts creating a flower and taking root. And I'm so thankful that it eventually took root. Yeah. Because he was right. We've got to be able to lightly or loosely hold on to what we know so that we can receive more, and so that also we can get rid of the stuff that was holding us down and keeping us from growing. Yeah. So anyway, that's just my.
No, absolutely. No, it is. It's so true. And that's, I was going to say about, that's where people in those positions where people kind of look up to, if you like, as paragons isn't the right word, but people who understand their particular subject, when they can have that looseness of grip on those beliefs, it's a wonderful thing. Because as you found out, when it comes from somebody that you looked up to on that particular subject, it does sink in.
And it to be honest, it probably took a while to germinate, just like a seed does. Yeah. Where it has to, it sprouts a little bit, but it's got to dig some roots to take hold before it can really gain some strength. So it probably took a couple of years, but it stayed in my head and burrowed deep enough to finally it took root. Because and everything's about being ready, right? So there are seasons. Sometimes you're ready for things, and sometimes you're not. But sometimes seeds are planted so that when you are ready, they can grow. Because a seed, like in real life and in the spiritual world, a seed never loses its power. They have found seeds that are 4,000 years old that are still able to grow. Yeah. Because all that power was still in that little seed, just waiting to be able to express itself.
Exactly. It's information waiting. So that information's gone into your system, however you want to view that. Whether you're receiving it from God or receiving it from the field, or it's stored within you in some way. yeah, and the moment it receives whatever kind of nourishment it needed to bring it to life, yeah, it then comes to life. Yeah, that's something that fascinates me. You only really need to hear something once. They say you need to hear something again and again and again, and I get that in terms of the subconscious. Repeating something becomes a pattern. But if you get the information even once, it's in there ready.
So I think that could be the parable of the sower, right? So some people, if the seeds are scattered on shallow ground, maybe they need to be scattered several times to make an impression. But if the seed is scattered or thrown in just the right crack or just the right spot, even if you forget about it, it's down in there.
Yeah.
So, and that could be a issue of timing. It could be an issue of who you are at the moment, what you need. But if it falls in the right crack and it can take root, then it only takes once. But maybe if it's on the shallow or higher up on the surface, maybe it takes a few times. We're all different, and we all got our own nooks and crannies and cracks and crevices, right? So
yeah, true. Yeah, again, I'm reminded that I know nothing every time stuff like that comes up.
I never
other than this moment, which sounds cheesy, but that's essentially what we've been taught.
Well, really, that's the secret, right? Doing the best you can in the moment.
Yeah.
And then
it's so obvious. That's the thing. It's so obvious that this is all we really have, and that's.
So that was my most frustrating issue when it wasn't necessarily. I guess it was a growth issue. Sometimes growing is frustrating, or it just feels uncomfortable. But when the coronavirus and all the rapid rate of change was happening, where like businesses were shutting down, people were told to stay in homes and stuff like that, it was happening so fast that there were no rules for it. Like, it was not something in my experience on how to deal with.
Okay.
So trying to figure out how to make the best decisions during a time when I had no rules to play off of, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, it was the hardest thing for me, to not knowing what to do with no history or experience to back it up. Well, what is the best decision to move forward? Like, should I close my studio?
Yeah.
Because I don't have to yet. Should I? Because others are being made to. Others are being made to. Should I? Or like, it's just little things like that. But just finding myself wanting to make the best decision, but not knowing if I was doing so. Like, it was just
and that ties into people pleasing and everything, doesn't it, from a young age?
Yeah.
So.
And I'm a huge people pleaser. Like, huge people pleaser.
Yeah, I've been there myself. I don't know if I still am, but I certainly was. So yeah, there's so much it's tapping into, and this is, we said earlier about the the levels of, I don't like to call it programming, because beliefs, whatever you want to call them, that we have, and being with them. And I don't know if there's any magical way other than sitting with that, other than speaking it out loud. That's something I've learned a lot lately, is how we literally create. And this was something that I just didn't get for a long time, how we create with words, literally what we speak. And I'm still getting to grips with, how can that be so? But that, that reality that's created in the moment, in the being here now, is, whether you look at it as a quantum physics thing or whatever. So when you have that decision for you to make, it's a tough one. You sit with, okay, what do I feel right doing right now? And you might make what you later look back on and think was not a decision you were necessarily happy with, but if it felt right at the time, then I believe that's the right decision to make. Because, as I mentioned this to you in an email, I don't know whether how relevant the story was to you at the time, but with my daughter, when she was 3, and how in a moment I expressed my truth at that time, which went against everything I believed in terms of parenting. And I shouted at her, which was something that I personally don't believe is necessary. Won't go into the whys and wherefores. And I could have looked back on that as an awful thing, as a horrible thing, a terrible decision that I made at that moment. But what came out of that, because about 3 seconds after I started to shout, looking in her eyes, it just became this. I just started mumbling silly words and being really, really jokey. And we had this most amazing moment that changed our relationship forever. So the point with that is simply that you can only make what decision feels right in any given moment. And it's always the right decision in that moment. Because even if you change your mind half an hour later, at least you made a decision. And then you can make another one, and then you can make another one, and you can go forward from that rather than just being in this, I don't know. Do something, make a call, and then, don't regret it later. But it's. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but
it really does. And I have a very similar parenting experience, but for this episode of the Corona Chronicles, it does make sense, because that's pretty much where I landed. Was this is the best I know to do now. And if it turns out great. If it turns out wrong, great. At least I'm learning. I'll learn from it and I can adjust. But, and then I learned to give myself a little bit of grace, because it was really to the point of, Tim, you've never been here before. No one's ever been here before. There are no rules. Do the best you can and be okay with it. And that was helpful.
And isn't that huge? It's very easy for us to look at what you've just done then and what you just said and think nothing of that. But that's a huge growth moment right there.
Yeah.
You've been through that, what seems like a trivial thing, but it's not. It's not trivial at all. You know?
So to take this full circle with what you said about how we can create with words, basically, though, that is what you were saying when you were talking about nutrition and how what we wrap or our thoughts about what we're eating, like if this is this food's going to harm me, but I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily the nutritional content of the food that matters as much as it is the thoughts we wrap around the food. So that is, in a sense, creating with words, because you're creating with thought. Like we really are stroking the brush on the canvas. We're the artist. And we do create with our thoughts, because that's information too. So you got the information from the food, and then you've got the information from the thoughts that you're wrapping around the food. And that's going to create something, because you're stroking that brush with your thoughts.
Yeah.
So that's full circle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want it to be more controversial, but just chuck stuff out there randomly. Just say, this is really good for you, just to get some people up. But I don't like doing that.
So I think here's the controversial thing inside of nutrition. Being a vegan, or being a raw vegan, or being a carnivore, or being whatever.
Yeah.
It is absolutely right. That is the right way for the right person in that right season of their life.
Yeah.
Then you can't extrapolate your viewpoints and your views and throw them on everybody else. Yeah. Because we're all trying to do the best we can anyway, and our bodies just need different things. Yeah. My body needs something your body doesn't need, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Now we may have similarities and overlap, and that's great.
Yeah.
But we're also going to have differences.
Crunchy peanut butter being one of those.
Crunchy butter, yes.
But that's it. And if we can all just start holding those a little more loosely, because of exactly the reasons you've just given, wouldn't it be wonderful? Could actually share useful information there.
We'll all be happy.
Yeah. We would. We need more comedy as well, though. Definitely.
More comedy is coming. Andrew, thank you so much. I love talking to you. So thank you again for just sharing your time and your wisdom. And guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Original Strength podcast. So this is great. Like I am trying to catch up and build up. Now's the time if I'm going to build a reserve of podcasts and conversations and stuff like that, or create content. This could be a great content creating time.
And how are you getting on other than that? I mean, I don't expect you to go into details, but you're okay?
Yeah, so it's like you said, you're walking outside and you're seeing how beautiful it is. So I am afforded the opportunity to open my eyes and embrace beauty, right? Like I've taken more walks with my wife now than I can remember when. I get to, last night I took my son, he's getting his, he has his driver's permit, but he's got to prepare for his license.
Okay.
So I filled up the car with gas and I took him out and we just drove for, 30 or 40 minutes. And so so things have slowed down and I can. And so and again, we all can, we can choose what we do, but like, I can see that, man, it's so beautiful outside. I can enjoy that.
Corona brought good weather. I mean, we've had weeks and weeks of sunshine.
Yeah, well, same here, and the temperature is perfect.
Yeah.
It is perfect. Like
Yeah.
So all of this stuff, like if this were ever going to happen, like now maybe all of us will be able to appreciate beauty just a little bit more, or nature, or just really now how nice it is to see somebody else smile at you when they're, especially if that's rare at the moment.
Yeah, and for a lot of people to not go to work. You might realize how, and I mean this with all due respect, how awful their jobs are for most people.
Well, yeah, I think, and I'm still not there yet, but I know that I have now the opportunity for some deep internal reflection. So, if I want to just sit down in silence and dive in, I can, and I've got the time to do so.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, and what's funny is it's not as if I didn't have it before.
Yeah.
You see, but it took a big shift
Yeah.
in everything else going on around me to be like, you know what? Why not?
It's very easy to allow yourself to be busy because, again, it's part of the, I don't like to use the word conditioning, but again, it's just what we do. It's a pattern, isn't it? It's a habit. It's a movement pattern. And we've got stuck in these movement patterns, which involve too much movement in some ways and not enough movement in other ways. And
shallow movement versus deep movement.
Yeah, exactly. And not enough of the deep stuff, and not deep in a serious way, because it's so much fun when you start to get deep. The stuff that's coming up for me is like, I'm amazed at where things have gone these last couple of weeks. Just the absolute game of it all.
So that's deep in a blissful way.
Yeah.
So
but it's
what's going on? Like, so what have you learned? What are you?
I've unlearned more. That's yeah. I've the central thing I know remains, and I don't see that going anywhere, which is what was revealed to me, which was this is how you work. Now, within that comes one massive caveat, and that's seeing everything as being these tiny little things that just interact and they're all the same. Call them cells, call them subatomic particles, whatever. And they're all just in different forms and whatever. And it all being movement and, taking that to whatever level. Is that supposedly when we don't view that, it's waves. It's our perception that creates the particle world. Without our observation, everything's waves. So, which is absolute truth? I don't know, and I don't care.
It's quantum physics.
Yeah,
so
it's quantum physics.
There's science behind that.
Yeah, the science behind it. And again, that's it. That's the whole point. The science behind it. But again, science is always going to be our perspective. Hence, that's the point. Is that we can delve as deep as we want into science, and it can be beautiful in terms of how it explains things. I watched a thing about E8, the structure of it's wonderful. It's very, very funny, actually. What was it called? It was a short video, one of the few things I watched, about half an hour long, about what is reality. No, not what is reality, the other one. Anyway, if you typed in E8, the Quantum Physics Research Group or something, it's a very entertaining thing about the structure and how it's not string theory and blah, 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 blah. It's fascinating stuff. But I'm unlearning stuff. I think I'm for want of a better expression, I'm getting closer to God or reality as it really is. Everything seems to be seeing this more as, yeah, look, I'm just this virtual reality suit that has all this stuff in it. And as more of it gets released through my own practice, the more stuff that I've learned is released, because everything we learn to make us more intelligent, more knowledgeable, all this stuff that we believe makes us clever, you know, that we're addicted to being clever as a species to a certain extent. I wouldn't say all of us are, and it varies to one extent or another. Addicted is probably the wrong word, but, you know, the more of this stuff that just becomes, that just kind of disappears, dissolves, the energy moves on, whatever you want to call it, the more I just be, I suppose. It sounds cheesy, but the more I do become closer to this moment, all the fears of that could be there of, well, what am I going to do to put a roof over the children's head and feed them without a job? It just floats away, because I know that today I've put things in place that I'm fine for a while, and there are no long-term worries anymore. Even death has come up in terms of, I thought I had no fear of death. I'm fairly sure I still don't. And I'm very clear that that's probably the biggest one that we face if we truly believe that we don't die, that we are this point of consciousness, that then it just changes everything. But even as I speak this out, I'm just well aware that I just want to be a light. I just want to be a light to anyone. And if I can be a light to one or two people on this planet, then I'm going to swear right now, fuck me, I've done my job.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the Original Strength podcast.